You've been told that war is as old as humanity itself. That the moment our ancestors stood upright, they started killing each other in organized groups. It feels true. It sounds inevitable. And then you look at a lakeshore in Kenya called Nataruk, 10,000 years old. 27 skeletons. 12 of them died violently. Arrowheads still stuck in bone, skulls crushed by blunt force. At first glance, it looks like the smoking gun, proof that Stone Age humans already fought wars. But a single massacre only proves that violence happened once, in one place. It does not prove that war was normal, or constant, or even that the people who died there would have called it war. So let's do this properly, site by site, mechanism by mechanism. Because the real answer isn't a date on a timeline. It's a shift in behavior that different groups reached at completely different times, or sometimes never reached at all. Start with biology. The capacity for coordinated killing might not even be uniquely human. In the forests of Gombe and Kabale, male chimpanzees form small patrols. They slip silently into a neighboring group's territory, find a lone male, and beat him to death. Then they come back days later and do it again. Jane Goodall watched this unfold in the 1970s. Researchers later called it the Gombe Chimpanzee War. It shook a lot of people. The pattern, deliberate small-scale raids rather than chaotic brawls, looks uncomfortably familiar. But look one branch over on the same family tree. Bonobos share nearly identical DNA with chimpanzees. They split from the same ancestor. Yet when rival bonobo groups meet, they usually end up grooming, playing, or having sex. There is still no confirmed case of one bonobo community wiping out another. Same starting material, completely different outcome. Whatever pushes a species toward organized violence is not a fixed switch, it's a dial. Nature loaded the dice. It never decided the final number. Geography did a lot of the work of preventing war for most of human history. For almost the entire Paleolithic, population density was tiny by modern standards. Small bands scattered across vast, empty landscapes. Two groups could go years, sometimes generations, without ever meeting. War needs an enemy close enough to reach, angry enough to fight, and holding something worth the risk. Remove the first condition, and the other two barely matter. A world with room to walk away simply doesn't need war the way a crowded one does. The site most often cited as the oldest evidence of prehistoric warfare sits on the Nile in Sudan. It's called Jebel Sahaba. Around 13,000 years ago, roughly 100 people were buried there with cut marks and stone points still embedded in their bones. For decades, it was treated as the textbook example of an ancient battle. Newer analysis changed the picture. The wounds don't all belong to one single event. They look more like a string of smaller, separate violent episodes, spread across years, maybe generations. Jebel Sahaba ends up teaching a lesson about assumption as much as it does about violence. The same bones can look like a war, or a long series of bitter feuds. It depends on how carefully you read the timeline. Not every ancient death by violence deserves the word war. Ötzi the Iceman is the clearest reminder. Found frozen in the Alps, more than 5,000 years old, with an arrowhead still lodged in his shoulder. His death was deliberate and brutal, but it was also personal. One killer, one victim, no mass grave, no burned village. Researchers still argue over the motive. Blood feud? Robbery? A grudge that turned lethal? Whatever it wasn't organized conflict between communities. Interpersonal murder is ancient. Organized, sustained violence between groups is a different, much rarer thing. Confusing the two is how a single arrowhead gets mistaken for evidence of war. Move forward to about 5000 BCE, to a village called Talheim in what is now Germany. Excavators found a pit containing at least 34 bodies, men, women, and children. Almost all of them were killed by axe blows to the head. Here's the detail that changes everything. There were almost no young adult males among the dead. That absence suggests the fighting age men were either away or that the attackers specifically waited until they were gone and then destroyed everyone left behind. This wasn't a skirmish over a river crossing. It reads like the deliberate annihilation of one farming community by another nearby. The kind of calculated territorial violence that finally starts to look like what most of us mean when we say the word war. And that word farming is the real hinge. Once people stopped moving with the seasons and began planting the same fields year after year, they created something worth defending and worth stealing. Stored grain, fenced animals, a fixed address. Mobile hunter-gatherers rarely faced that problem. If a rival band appeared, the cheapest option was usually just to leave and find another valley. Farmers no longer had that option. Their food was in the ground behind them, and so was their reason to stay and fight. Scarcity plus a permanent home may be the real turning point between occasional violence and organized war. Anthropologists have tried to settle the question by looking at hunter-gatherer societies that still exist today. The results refuse to line up neatly. Among the Yanomami of the Amazon, studied for decades by Napoleon Changyan, roughly 1 in 3 adult male deaths was linked to conflict between villages, a staggering rate. Among the Hadza of Tanzania, or the Juhawansi of the Kalahari, lethal intergroup violence is far rarer. Most disputes end with someone simply walking away. Same basic technology, same absence of agriculture and government, completely different outcomes. If living foragers can't agree on how violent natural human life is, the fossil record was never going to hand us one clean answer either. By the time we reach more complex farming societies, the scale changes completely. At Crow Creek in South Dakota, archaeologists uncovered the remains of nearly 500 people, an entire village, scalped, mutilated, and thrown into a defensive ditch around the year 1325. This wasn't small nomadic bands. These were settled, populous communities competing for land along the Missouri River. The violence here isn't ambiguous. It isn't small. It looks exactly like what most people picture when they hear the word war. Because by this point, almost every real ingredient was already in place. Territory, population pressure, and something worth killing to keep. All of this sits inside an old argument that scholars still haven't resolved. One side, tracing back to Thomas Hobbes, argues that prehistoric life was violent by nature, conflict baked into us from the start. The other side, closer to Jean-Jacques Rousseau, argues that war as we understand it, organized, sustained, fought over territory, is a relatively recent invention that agriculture and hierarchy created rather than revealed. The honest answer disappoints both camps a little. The capacity for coordinated violence is ancient. The conditions that turn that capacity into actual war are recent, situational, and more avoidable than we like to admit. So go back to that lakeshore in Kenya, or the pit in Germany, or the ditch in South Dakota. The question was never really whether ancient humans went to war. Some did. Many, for long stretches of prehistory, simply never had to. War was not humanity's default setting, waiting since the beginning to switch on. It was one possible outcome of scarcity, geography, and a fixed address. Something our species was always capable of, but rarely forced into until the ground beneath us stopped moving. We didn't inherit war. We built the conditions for it, one stored harvest at a time. What do you think? Was organized war inevitable, or did we create it?